I, 35-year-old female, have been dating my boyfriend, 37, for 5 years. We have a 4-year-old daughter, Haley, together, and he has 2 children from previous relationships, Sarah, 16 years old, and Joe, 17 years old. I bought a property with about 6 acres of land when I met my boyfriend. I always thought I'd build a house for my child on it when the time came. So when Haley was born, I immediately started a college fund for her in a separate account to eventually build her a house when she turned 18 on the property. She could live there while in college and still have privacy and space, and could decide if she wanted to stay or buy a different house. If she stayed, that plot of the land would be hers. And when I say she'll have privacy, that plot is on the opposite side of the property as our current house on the 6 acres. I'm well aware she wouldn't want to be directly next to me, but would be close enough to drive an ATV to the house if she wanted to. My boyfriend is well aware of my plans and thinks it'll be wonderful for Haley to stay close to us. My stepchildren were older when I met them, so we never truly bonded. I tried, but they wanted to do their own thing, and I always respected that. Joe came to the house this past weekend and asked when we'd be starting to build his home on the property. I asked him what he meant, and he said since we were doing it for Haley, he expected the same since they are both their father's children. I was extremely surprised and looked at my boyfriend, who told his son he didn't own this property, and that's a big request. We talked about it that night in private, and my boyfriend asked if we should use the money set aside for Haley and build his son a house first. I said no. I love his children, but they have a mother and a father. Haley only has me and her father. My boyfriend thinks I'm being the jerk because this will create a wedge between him and his children. He said his ex won't be able to afford to pay for his son to build a home or buy one, and he can't afford it between bills, child support, and everything he has to pay for his older children. Am I the jerk? To add, I've seen comments asking about financials. We split the household bills 50-50. I make a higher earning, and my extra money goes to my savings and Haley's. My boyfriend does send me money, not directly into her account, but just sends it to me, because he wanted it to be a fair playing field, that she got what she would have received for child support. I do take that money and deposit it into her account, and I pay for all of Haley's needs. He also pays for his older children's additional activities, since that was part of his original child support agreement. Just to be clear, even if he stopped sending me the money for Haley, which is fine, it wouldn't be enough for his son to build a home. Now for an update, we decided to have a family meeting. I dropped off Haley with my parents just in case discussions got tense, and she's too young to understand. Joe and Sarah came to the house and we all talked. Joe and Sarah assumed their father's name was also on the deed mortgage because I bought it right around the time we had started dating and got pregnant with Haley not long after that. Joe said the reason he thought he'd eventually also live on the property was because he thought his dad was also an owner, and that my boyfriend always said he'd treat them all equally. Joe said he just felt like Haley got an unfair advantage, and he didn't just because my boyfriend and his had him young, and I had Haley when I was older. He said he thought his father was doing it for all 3 of them. We did explain I bought the property on my own, and that their father is technically a tenant. My boyfriend did explain the situation as Haley having a different mother, so different financial situation the same way their friends' parents may have different financial situations than we do. Joe said that's different because it's not his sister. I asked them how they knew about any of these plans. They both said they overheard different pieces of conversations, and when they talked to each other, they put everything together and figured it out. Sarah then explained she needed something from my office one day that we keep in the safe, and when I opened the safe to get it, she saw there was a file labeled Haley's Trust, which confirmed their thoughts. Joe said he's considering no contact with his dad if he doesn't figure out a fair solution. Joe said when Sarah told him about the file, that was why he confronted us the way he did. And Sarah said she just feels hurt that they're at a disadvantage. Emotions did run high, as to be expected. I just left to go pick up Haley to bring her home, but my boyfriend does look hurt. He might have less contact with his older children from this situation. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. Haley is your child. It's your money and your property. Your wording suggests even her father hasn't contributed to this fund. While it is a shame that Joe's mother and father cannot afford the same level of generosity you have done for your daughter, He is not your child. You're not even married to his father, and you have no relationship with Joe. It's very entitled for Joe to ask in the first place. It's even more entitled for his father to expect you to contribute towards his children. Comment 2. Not the idiot, you're not married. Maybe you're talking about the future, but those are grown butt kids. What did he put aside for them? I suspect nothing. If you getting your daughter something in 14 years is going to drive a wedge between him and his children, that sounds like a him problem. The other kids don't need to ever freaking know about it. It's not their business. If you're starting to feel a little used, that seems natural. Now for the update. Thanks for reading my last post. So after our family meeting, things got even more complicated. The next day, Joe and Sarah went back to their mom's place, and my boyfriend and I were left to deal with the fallout. My boyfriend was visibly upset, and I could tell he was struggling with the idea of potentially losing contact with his older kids. I felt terrible, but I also knew I had to stand my ground for Haley's future. The following day, my boyfriend suggested we talk to a family counselor to help mediate the situation. I agreed, thinking it might help us all understand each other better. We scheduled an appointment for the next day, and I hoped it would bring some clarity. When we arrived at the counselor's office, Joe and Sarah were already there with their mom. The counselor started by asking everyone to share their feelings and perspectives. Joe reiterated his belief that he and Sarah were being treated unfairly, and Sarah echoed his sentiments. Their mom, who had been relatively quiet until then, finally spoke up. She said she understood my position, but felt that my boyfriend should have communicated better with his kids about the property and Haley's trust. My boyfriend admitted he should have been more transparent, but he also expressed his frustration about not being able to provide equally for all his children. He said he felt torn between his responsibilities to his older kids and his commitment to our family. The counselor suggested we all take a step back and try to find a compromise that would make everyone feel valued. After the session, we went home and had a long talk. My boyfriend proposed that we set up a smaller fund for Joe and Sarah, even if it wasn't enough to build them houses. He thought it might show them that we care about their future too. I agreed, but I made it clear that Haley's trust would remain untouched. The next day, I started looking into setting up the new funds. I realized I had made a mistake by not considering the emotional impact my plans for Haley would have on Joe and Sarah. I had been so focused on securing Haley's future that I hadn't thought about how it might affect the family dynamics. I felt guilty and wanted to make things right. Meanwhile, Joe and Sarah were still upset, and their relationship with their dad was strained. Joe had stopped answering his dad's calls, and Sarah was distant. My boyfriend was heartbroken, and it was affecting our relationship too. We were both stressed and on edge, and it felt like we were constantly walking on eggshells around each other. A few days later, I decided to talk to Joe and Sarah directly. I invited them over for dinner, and they reluctantly agreed. During dinner, I apologized for not considering their feelings and explained that I never intended to make them feel less important. I told them about the new funds we were setting up for them and asked for their input on how we could make things better. Joe was still skeptical, but Sarah seemed more open to the idea. She said she appreciated the gesture, but felt it was more about the principle than the money. She wanted to feel like an equal part of the family, not just an afterthought. Joe nodded in agreement, and I realized we had a long way to go to rebuild their trust. Over the next few days, we worked on improving our communication. My boyfriend and I made a conscious effort to include Joe and Sarah in more family activities and decisions. We also started having regular family meetings to discuss any issues or concerns. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of tension, but slowly things began to improve. One evening, while we were all sitting in the living room, Joe opened up about his feelings. He said he had always felt like he had to compete for his dad's attention and that the situation with the property had brought those feelings to the surface. He admitted he was scared of losing his dad and wanted to find a way to move forward. Sarah echoed his sentiments, and I could see the pain in their eyes. My boyfriend apologized for not being more present and promised to do better. He also acknowledged that he had made mistakes and that it would take time to rebuild their trust. It was a raw and emotional conversation, but it felt like a turning point for all of us. As we continued to navigate this new dynamic, I couldn't help but reflect on my own upbringing. My parents had always been supportive, but they had also made it clear that I needed to be independent and self-sufficient. I realized that my desire to secure Haley's future was rooted in my own experiences and fears. I wanted to give her the stability and opportunities I had worked so hard for, but I also needed to find a balance that respected my boyfriend's children. In the end, we decided to take things one step at a time. We continued to work on our communication and made an effort to spend more quality time together as a family. My boyfriend and I also started attending counseling sessions on our own to address our relationship issues and find ways to support each other better. It's been a challenging journey, but we're slowly finding our way. Joe and Sarah are still adjusting, but they're starting to see that we're committed to making things work. My boyfriend and I are also learning to navigate the complexities of our blended family and finding ways to support each other through the ups and downs. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for telling my brother he should have thought about his ex-wife's views before having a kid with her? This is a conflict between me, 25-year-old female, and my brother, 30-year-old male. My brother has a 7-year-old daughter with his ex-wife, 30-year-old female. Right now, he's engaged to his current partner, 28-year-old female. They've been together for 2 years, so my brother and his ex are high school sweethearts who got married right after graduation, and they had my niece a few years later. My brother always knew his ex had the mindset that blended family isn't real family, step-family isn't real family, and half-siblings aren't real siblings. She had a blended family, and she did not consider them her family, just bio. She was always very anti-step/half in general. When they were newly married, they were asked to leave my aunt and uncle's house because my uncle is technically my cousin's adoptive father, formerly step, and my brother's ex was spewing that nonsense in their house. His ex always talked about how her kids would know family is blood, family is real mom, real dad, real siblings, and would never ever have a family relationship with any steps. My brother knew this before they had my niece. He still had my niece with her, and when they broke up when my niece was 2, he never acknowledged the fact that it was going to be difficult for him to partner up again and have a decent household when my niece was being raised with those views. This is where his partner, he calls her fiance, comes in. They've been dating for 2 years, and my niece does not acknowledge her as dad's girlfriend and is generally kind of hostile to her. It's not adult levels, but she says a lot of the stuff her mom has taught her. So when my brother proposed, his girlfriend said she couldn't say yes at that moment, and she asked for couples counseling. Apparently, she loves my brother, but has her doubts about the future with my niece's views and reluctance to accept her. She said she doesn't want to make things worse and doesn't want a household where the child isn't comfortable with her. Plus, she wants children, and knowing how my niece feels, it's a concern for her. My brother is really starting to worry he will lose her now. He was talking to me about it, and I told him he should have considered this when he divorced because he knew how his ex spoke to their daughter and the views she was teaching her. He told me that's not his fault, and how dare I blame him for his ex's decisions. I said I'm not blaming him for her decisions. I'm blaming him for not taking those into consideration and not counteracting them right away. I told him he started doing it when his ex had already gotten several years of a head start on him, and he only started when it was clear my niece was refusing to give his girlfriend a shot, which is something his girlfriend was taking note of very clearly. He told me I am still blaming him for his ex's decisions, and he also told me to frick off. Am I the jerk? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot. His ex always talked about how her kids would know family is blood, family is real mom, real dad, real siblings, and would never ever have a family relationship with any step-parents. He knew that before he conceived a child with her. His failure to think through the consequences isn't on you. Comment 2, not the idiot, you're correct. He should have been more aware of what his daughter was being taught and how it was likely to affect any relationship of his. If not before then, at least when they divorced. Her decisions aren't his fault, but his decision to not act is his fault. Now for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. So after that heated argument with my brother, things got even more complicated. The day after our fight, my brother called me up and apologized for telling me to frick off. He said he was just really stressed out and didn't mean to take it out on me. I accepted his apology, but I could tell he was still really upset about the whole situation with his fiancée and my niece. 2 days later, my brother's fiance called me. She wanted to talk about what had happened and get my perspective on things. She said she felt like she was stuck in the middle and didn't know what to do. She loves my brother but is really worried about the future, especially with my niece's attitude towards her. She asked me if I had any advice on how to handle the situation. I told her that it was important for her and my brother to be on the same page and to present a united front. I also suggested that they try to have a calm and honest conversation with my niece about her feelings and try to understand where she's coming from. The next day, my brother and his fiancée sat down with my niece to talk. They tried to explain to her that just because her mom has certain views about family, it doesn't mean she has to feel the same way. They told her that it's okay to have different kinds of families and that they all love her very much. My niece listened, but she didn't say much. She just nodded and went back to playing with her toys. Later that night, my brother called me again. He said the conversation with my niece didn't go as well as he had hoped. She was still very quiet and didn't seem to want to open up. He was starting to feel really hopeless and didn't know what to do next. I could hear the frustration and sadness in his voice, and it broke my heart. I told him that these things take time and that he shouldn't give up. I also suggested that they continue with the couple's counseling and maybe even consider family therapy to help my niece work through her feelings. The following day, my brother's ex-wife found out about the conversation they had with my niece. She was furious and called my brother to yell at him. She accused him of trying to brainwash their daughter and said that she would never allow her to accept his fiancée as part of their family. My brother was devastated. He felt like he was being attacked from all sides and didn't know how to make things right. That night, my brother's fiancée came over to my place. She was in tears and said that she didn't know if she could handle all the drama anymore. She loves my brother, but she doesn't want to be in a situation where she's constantly fighting for acceptance. She said she was thinking about breaking off the engagement and moving out. I could see how much pain she was in, and I didn't know what to say to make her feel better. The next morning, my brother showed up at my door. He looked exhausted and said he hadn't slept all night. He told me that his fiancée had left him and that he didn't know what to do. He was heartbroken and felt like his whole world was falling apart. I tried to comfort him, but I knew that there was nothing I could say to make the situation better. Over the next few days, my brother and his fiancée continued to talk, but things were still very tense. They both wanted to make it work, but they didn't know how to move forward with my niece's feelings and his ex-wife's interference. My brother was torn between his love for his fiancée and his responsibility to his daughter. He didn't want to lose either of them, but he didn't know how to make it work. In the midst of all this, I started to think about our own family history. Our parents had a rocky marriage and eventually divorced when we were kids. My brother and I were raised by our mom, and our dad was mostly absent from our lives. I realized that my brother's fear of losing his fiancée and his daughter was rooted in his own childhood experiences. He didn't want his daughter to go through the same pain and confusion that we did. He wanted to create a stable and loving family for her, but he didn't know how to do it with all the obstacles in his way. As I watched my brother struggle, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. I was angry at his ex-wife for being so rigid in her views and for making things so difficult for everyone. I was sad for my niece, who was caught in the middle of all this drama and didn't know how to process her feelings. And I was heartbroken for my brother, who was trying so hard to make things work, but felt like he was failing at every turn. In the end, my brother had to make a hard choice. He decided to take a step back from his relationship with his fiancée and focus on his daughter. He realized that he needed to be there for her and help her work through her feelings before he could move forward with his own life. It was a painful decision, but he knew it was the right one for now. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for pressing charges against my dad's cousin and her wife for stealing my social security number? 16-year-old female had a job interview for a fast food chain on Tuesday. I got hired and told to come back Thursday to set up so I could start working soon. This would be my first job ever. I go in on Thursday and there's a part where I have to put in my social security number in the system. When I enter it, I got an error saying that my social security number was already in use with another profile. That was obviously strange since I had never worked at a restaurant from this company, or even at all. I texted my dad to let him know what was going on. He says he's on his way to my job. When he gets there, I come out and he says, "I think I know what's happening." It's because they screwed me over. Let's call them S and C. By the way, C is an immigrant, my father's cousin and her wife. He then continues and says, S and C asked me for your social security number, and they promised they would only use it to actually get C the job and nothing else. C happens to be working at the same company in a different part of town. It took everything in me not to get angry. We went to C's workplace. My father told her that she was working with my social security number. I think my father was trying to fix my situation now, but he was acting as if they had gone and stolen my social security number without him knowing, when he's the one who literally gave it to them. C has been working for several months. My father dropped me off at my mom's house. She then noticed I was a little off. I told her, I can't start working yet. She asked why. I told her everything. I could notice she was angry. This is the one thing I asked of him when we were married. To never use you or your brother's social security number for anything no matter what, she said. We go to my father's house. He and my brother were outside unloading groceries, and she gets out of the car and yells at him. She told me, even a few years ago when I had just come back into the country and was struggling to even find a job as an illegal, I didn't even think about ever using your social security number. The next day, my mom and I went to the police station and filed a report about all three of them. The deputy who assisted us helped us write the report and told us to go to the Social Security Administration. Although, why didn't they use my aunt's son's social security number? It still would have been wrong, but they could have. Why use mine? I do feel kind of bad for reporting them. I do care about my father's cousin. I call her aunt. Now, my aunt's wife might get deported, and even if she doesn't, she'll never be able to get her citizenship now. Also, there was barely anything done to my credit score. So maybe it was an overreaction because there wasn't much damage. If she had done more under my social security number, I would have had to get a new social security number. The lady who assisted us said it would have been a more lengthy and complicated process. She told me it actually wouldn't hurt keeping that on there, though she said she could wipe it. I said I prefer that. To be honest, I'm not completely sure how this all works. I'm only 16, haven't been out in the world much. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. It's called identity theft. Her wages were being reported under your number. When you went to do taxes, you would have been in trouble for not reporting correct wages. Your dad had no business giving out your social security number, SSN, and was part of the fraud for providing it. With that number, they could have opened credit cards and taken out loans that would appear on your credit report. You are never TA, the jerk, for reporting fraud and identity theft. Comment 2. Not the idiot, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Father should have known better. It would inevitably interfere with your life one way or another due to identity theft. Now for the update. Thanks for all the comments from my last post. So after we filed the report at the police station, things got even more complicated. The police took the report seriously and started an investigation. They contacted my aunt and her wife, and it turns out they had been using my social security number for more than just the job. They had also opened a credit card in my name. I found out when I got a call from a credit card company asking about a missed payment. I was shocked and immediately told my mom. We went back to the police station to update our report. The deputy was very understanding and added the new information. He said this made the case more serious and that they would have to take further action. My mom was furious and said she would never forgive my dad for putting me in this situation. She also mentioned that this could affect my future, like getting student loans or even a job. My dad tried to apologize, but my mom wasn't having it. She told him that he had betrayed my trust and that of our family. My dad looked really guilty and said he didn't know they would go this far. He said he just wanted to help them out because they were struggling. But my mom said that was no excuse for putting me at risk. Meanwhile, my aunt and her wife were freaking out. They called my dad multiple times, begging him to drop the charges. They even offered to pay back any money they had used, but my mom was adamant that they needed to face the consequences of their actions. She said this was a lesson they needed to learn. The police eventually arrested my aunt and her wife. My dad was devastated and kept saying he didn't mean for things to go this far. He said he just wanted to help them out and didn't think about the consequences. My mom told him that he needed to start thinking about his actions and how they affect others. I felt really conflicted. On one hand, I was angry at my dad for putting me in this situation. On the other hand, I felt bad for my aunt and her wife. They were just trying to make a better life for themselves, but they went about it the wrong way. I also felt guilty for being the reason they got arrested, but my mom said it wasn't my fault and that they made their own choices. As for the job, I had to explain the situation to the manager. They were understanding, but said they couldn't hire me until the issue was resolved. I felt really embarrassed and disappointed. This was supposed to be my first job, and it was ruined because of something I had no control over. The Social Security Administration said they would issue me a new Social Security number, but it would take some time. They also said I needed to monitor my credit report regularly to make sure there were no other fraudulent activities. It felt like a lot of responsibility for a 16-year-old, but my mom said she would help me. During all this, I learned more about my dad's past. My mom told me that he had always been too trusting and that this wasn't the first time he had gotten into trouble because of it. She said he had lent money to friends who never paid him back and even co-signed a loan for someone who defaulted. She said she had warned him multiple times, but he never listened. I also found out that my aunt and her wife had been struggling for a long time. My mom said they had tried to get legal status multiple times, but were always denied. They had been living in fear of deportation and were desperate to find a way to stay in the country. My mom said she understood their desperation, but that it didn't justify their actions. I started to see my dad in a different light. I realized that he wasn't just careless. He was also trying to help people he cared about. But his good intentions often led to bad outcomes. I felt sorry for him, but also angry that he never seemed to learn from his mistakes. My mom and I had a long talk about trust and responsibility. She said that I needed to be careful about who I trusted and that I should always think about the consequences of my actions. She also said that she would always be there to support me and that we would get through this together. In the end, my aunt's wife was deported and my aunt was left to deal with the fallout. My dad was heartbroken and said he felt responsible for ruining their lives. My mom said it was their own actions that led to this, but I could see that my dad was struggling with guilt. I still haven't started my job, but I'm hopeful that things will get better. My mom said we would find a way to move forward and that this experience would make me stronger. I just hope that my dad learns from this and that we can all find a way to heal. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.